Welcome to Mathematics for Parents. My name is Dani, and if you allow me, I would like to show you how, with a little bit of effort on your end, you can help your child to become a superstar when it comes to mathematics. This video we are dedicating to number bonds, their importance, and how we can practice it with our kids, as well as how two key mathematical operations will be introduced to your child: addition and subtraction. So if you are just joining in, I will advise you to go and quickly have a look at the previous videos from this particular series. The entire series is dedicated to academic year 1 when it comes to primary school education, and it is important to follow the sequence of information that we have put out there in order for you to be able to build up that confidence that you really need in order to easily and effectively assist your child when it comes to mathematics. If you have seen the previous videos by now, thank you so much for your time. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't done that already. And of course, leave a like if you find the content of this particular video interesting. Nevertheless, if you want to be notified every time we upload a new video, the bell button and pressing it will allow that to happen. Now let's look into number bonds. What are number bonds? As I mentioned, so far we have looked into the part-whole concept, how important it is as a very first mathematical concept that children should be aware of and being able to talk about. We have also looked that this concept wasn't new to our children. The new element is introducing it into the context of mathematics. We also looked into a number composition and how, using the part-whole concept, children were introduced to numbers as a quantity and how they can break it down, how they can partition them using the part-whole concept, using cherry diagrams or bar models. Now we are looking into number bonds. Are number bonds different than number composition knowledge? No, they aren't. The different element here is, for the very first time, your child is introduced to the numerical representation of the skills that they have obtained so far, meaning number sentences or mathematical equations, with the use of symbols like plus, minus, and equal. So number bonds is nothing new. It's just the knowledge that kids have obtained so far when it comes to number compositions and how to build up a quantity, how to separate it, the whole and the two parts. And it's just now being introduced into writing it down as an equation. So let's look into that particular element a little bit more, how that transition is done. Oh, it's very important to know that a lot of mathematics and the way it is presented, especially in Key Stage 1, which means year 1 and year 2, is through a storytelling. We have seen that in the part-whole concept introduction. We have seen that in the subitizing skills that they have been encouraged to develop. And we have seen that into number composition and the way when the classroom lesson is taking place, the children are presented to mathematics more like a story, and story that they can engage in and they can take part with. It's very similar thing it will happen here when it comes to number bonds. They're going to be showing a different type of tasks and equations to solve. One of them looks like this. As you can see, the whole idea of this task is to engage children. Mother duck is in the park with her 5 ducklings. There are 2 ponds. How many ducklings could be playing in each pond? Children will have the ability to use the knowledge of number compositions in a fun, engaging way, and to have different opinions. One child may decide that one duck doesn't like the other 4 and likes to play on its own, or just needs a little bit of space. So one duckling will go into the first pond and the other 4 will go into the second pond. Then they may decide that they want to swap ponds, and the 4 ducks from the second pond will go to the first pond, and the duck from the first pond will go to the second one. Other children may have different ideas and may want all the ducklings to go into and play into one pond. A third child may have the idea that two of the ducklings are really best friends and they want to go and explore pond number 1, and the other 3 ducklings will want to stay in the familiar pond number 2. All this kind of engagement and the use of knowledge, skills, and abilities, and of course through storytelling, is then represented to the very familiar cherry diagram or through the bar method. Now, the element that will be new here is the numerical representation of those equations. Being introduced to the symbol plus, minus, and equal seems a little bit scary to children, but using that type of story ideas, using their knowledge that they have solidified through number compositions, it will be very easy for them to express it just in an equation. So we have 5 ducklings. 1 will go to pond number 1 and the other 4 will go to pond number 2. The representation should look like this. 5 is equal 1 plus 4. A very important element here is that at this stage, we are not talking about addition and subtraction quite yet. We are using the plus symbol, but just as a way of numerically being able to represent the 2 parts from the part-part-whole concept, the 2 parts that coming together in order to create the whole, which in this case is number 5. Those 2 parts, however, we discussed previously that they can be different. Number 5 can be represented by 0 and 5. It can be represented by 1 and 4, by 2 and 3. And it will also can be represented in a different place. The 2 parts can swap places, but it will still remain the combination of them as the whole. So you can have 5 equals 2 plus 3, but you can also have 5 equals 3 plus 2. Different representation of the part-part-whole concept in a numerical way. This is the idea behind number bonds. Number bonds cannot be neglected in a way, simply because our children have to get used to that. It's a very similar fact like the times table. So we have the times table from 1 to 12, and we are expecting children to memorize it, to be able to fast and accurately solve equations further down the line. What we need to do here is exactly the same. We need to ensure that our children can follow all these number bonds equations. They can know them and build upon that sympathizing skill that we have developed earlier on. When we were looking at a couple of objects, we can tell what is the number of the objects without having to count. Here, we will have to train our eye, or our children's eye, to look at an equation and to almost immediately come up with the answer. Because when they look at this equation, they have to understand that these are 2 parts of a particular whole. That's what number bonds are. So when I ask you, what is 6 plus 4, you can tell me straight away that it's 10. You don't need to exercise any particular skill like counting. You don't need to use your fingers. You don't need to write down the equation in order to be able to reach the answer. This is simply because your sympathizing skill is so well developed. You have practiced it almost all your life, and now with a very quick, accurate answer and assurance and a confidence, you can say that yes, 4 plus 6 is equal 10. The same way that you can say that 3 plus 7 is equal 10. The same way that you can say that 1 plus 9 is equal 10. All these 3 equations that I've just mentioned, they are the number bonds when it comes to the number 10. What we need to do is help our children to develop that type of accuracy and understanding of number bonds for all the numbers available from 1 to 10. That will make addition and subtraction further down the line as operations so much more easier, and children will feel confident that they know what they're doing and they don't have to get confused, especially when we begin with two-digit numbers adding one-digit number, or two-digit numbers adding two-digit numbers, or of course taking away. But this type of flow we need to follow, and we need to understand that number composition is key here. The number bonds is just a numerical representation. And we need to make sure that we train our child's eyes to be able to solve this type of equation. I will show you now the introduction to the minus symbol. The way that the minus will be introduced is not as we are taking away something from the whole, but it will be as if we are separating the two different parts of the whole. Again, these are not addition and subtraction operations at this stage, especially when we are referring them in the context of number bonds. These are just the representation, the numerical representation of the part-whole concept. As you can see with this exercise in particular, there are 6 children. 2 of them have put their codes on. How many have not put their codes on yet? This type of representation, children will be encouraged to demonstrate in a form of a number sentence. So if we know that within the room we have 6 kids, we take that part, we split those those 6 kids into 2 parts. One part will represent children who are wearing coats, and one part will represent children who are not wearing coats. Also, if you remember previously, especially when it comes to the part-whole concept and the number composition, children were practicing a lot that if we know the whole and we know one part of the whole, we can very easily find the second part. This type of equations that look like subtraction are actually number bonds for numbers from 1 to 10 in the reverse form. So with the plus, we're going to represent number bonds that put the 2 parts together to reach the whole, and with the minus we're going to represent the whole is known, one part is known, and we need to just find the second part. Very often when we are encouraged to help our child develop and practice number bonds at home, we are doing something that can be classified as not effective way of practicing. And what do I mean by that? So you have received a comment that children are going to be learning number bonds at the moment, so the teacher will encourage all parents to practice number bonds at home. When you look into a definition for number bonds, you will see an equation, number bonds to 10, and you will have a number of equations that are representing addition or subtraction with the result to 10, let's say numbers for 10, numbers for 6, 5, 3, within that particular 10 digits. The task you might decide to present your child look like this, because these are the most common and easily obtainable resources that are currently online. So what are we noticing here? A lot of equations. And when you sit with your kid and you are trying to help them, you start immediately looking into those equations as to, okay, so we have 4, we can just add 6, and that will give us the number 10. So you are trying to assist your child using addition and subtraction as operations, simply because you can see the equation and this is the first immediate association that you are doing. But that can be extremely confusing for your kid, because up until now at school they're discussing the 2 parts that needs to come together in order to make a whole, or a whole and one part, a second part is missing, so we need to find that second part. So just by the simple introduction to terms as add to and take away from, children can be a little bit confused. So when it comes to number bonds, I will advise the best way to practice this particular skill and try to develop it based upon the sympathizing skills that they have in recognizing objects just by looking at it. They don't even have to count them. So look at that number bond practice in the same kind of manner. So present your child with this type of exercises, where we're looking into one number as a whole only, and we look in all the variety of bonds that that one number can hold within itself. So for example, looking at these particular exercises, you can see that the whole is always 7, and children are encouraging to look into different parts. So we know that the whole is 7 and we know one of the parts, so we need to find out what is the second part. Using same number as a whole, for example, today children can practice number 7, tomorrow they can practice number 10, the day after number 5, and you can switch and turn around using plus and minus sign. But the exercises and the equations that you need to present your child with in order to effectively practice what they're taught at school is to maintain that idea that at the moment they're not learning addition and subtraction. At the moment they are learning number bonds. We are building on our sympathizing ability and skill to look into an equation and to know the answer immediately. Now, just to summarize, what are number bonds? Number bond is the numerical representation of number compositions. That's all. The actual equation. Number bonds also represent more than one way of reaching the same number. And this is very important for us to practice with our children. So if you present your child with a simple task like this one, and explain to them that you're practicing number bonds, they will be so much more enthusiastic, simply because this is the structure that they have in the classroom, and they will be able, they know what they need to do, they know what kind of ideas they need to follow, and they are fully aware and confident, not confused at all when it comes to sitting in front of a list with equations like this one. However, if during number bonds lesson we are trying to present our children with a task that looks like this can cause confusion, especially if we are encouraging them to do addition and subtraction, when actually, in reality, they haven't even been introduced to those operations. Just because the number sentence has a plus or a minus within itself, it doesn't mean that the task in hand is to perform addition or subtraction. At the very first stage, when children are looking into number bonds, remember, always think about the concept part, whole. Number bonds is the numerical representation of that concept. We have one whole and we have two parts. We can either add the two parts to find out what the whole is, or we can have a whole and a one part, and we can always find what the missing part will be. Very important. Structure, and keep with the number bonds as a sentence, not looking at them as actual mathematical operations. This will come next, and it will be presented in a very particular way that you should be familiar with. So when you want to use the second type of task to practice with your child, a conversation needs to take place that gives them these directions as to what exactly skill and ability they need to perform answering an equations like this. Part 2 available now in our gallery.